Welcome back to the weekend show, and this is the political segment, one of my favorite things to watch on TV. And a week ago, Nigerians went out to vote for the next president of Nigeria, who happens to be the current president of Nigeria. Also, National Assembly elections for the House of Representatives and the Senate. And interesting information is that 151 House of Reps members will not be returning to the House of Assembly. And 64 senators will not be returning to the House, to the Senate. Also interesting is the fact that I've learned that we just have 6 women returning to the Senate and 10 to the House of Representatives. But all in all, Nigerians came out and they voted. And congratulations once again to President Muhammadu Buhari for being re-elected as president. On the political segment of this show today, we will be discussing the 2019 general elections for presidency and the National Assembly elections. With me in the studio, we have Douglas Baye. Douglas Baye, who is a legislative aide. He is also a social commentator. In the studio with us. Hello, Douglas.
Good morning, viewers. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We also have with us Barrister Obianuju Dimude. She's a lawyer, a tax consultant, managing partner of Prodesk Law Firm, a humanitarian, writer, editor, public speaker, and trainer. Hello, Marianne.
Good morning. Good morning, Nigerians.
Back on the show is a very good friend, Johannes Toby Ojola. Toby is a lawyer, he's a friend, he's a dispute resolution expert, a member of the Nigerian President's media team, and a former Google ambassador. He's also a writer and a poet. Nice to have you with us today.
My pleasure, always.
Toby, what are your thoughts on the recently concluded elections?
Well, my thoughts are that I think it was largely a democratic process. And it's a wheel that runs every 4 years. A referendum on the president, a referendum on those who occupy positions of governance, a choice between 2 people or more people. Even though we can't pretend to ourselves that it was between 70 people, it was largely between two candidates.
2 people cancelled votes.
Exactly. And so it was people went out, voted. I had serious issues with commentaries I saw post-election and even pre-election, which I term as hyper-partisan views, where we're not reaching a consensus on, or we're focused on our differences more on our differences than on our shared values. It wasn't, the conversations were not necessarily about what was better for Nigeria, what was the blueprint, what could we see positive in either of the candidates, but it was either things were being looked at points of views, or things were looked at from religious points of views. That was not encouraging, but ultimately I think it's a burden that the president-elect, President Muhammadu Buhari, has to shoulder right now to be able to bring all sides of the house together as being that he won and he was re-elected.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I'll come back to you, but Marianne, 35% turnout. What do you think is the reason? Would we believe the elections were postponed, or could it be the fact that a lot of Nigerians, 80 million Nigerians plus, registered to vote? Did we just do this so that we can have PVCs as legitimate ID cards? 35%, that's unbecoming for a country growing in democracy.
That's really unbecoming. I read that yesterday and I was thinking, even while I was watching the elections, that why aren't people coming out? I know that one of the first things is the fact that it was postponed at the 11th hour. Most people had said they had traveled, they were ready to come out and vote, and then the postponement came and really pushed a lot of people, it took them unawares and it really distorted their plans. But another thing I think is most people don't really want to come out to vote. If you look at the populace that came out in the north versus those that came out in the east. In the east, for instance, I think in Anambra you have over 1 million accredited voters, and then you have those that came out to vote less than less than, and then you're thinking, why aren't you people coming out? What's the problem? So I think there's a problem with the voters' education. People don't really believe that their votes count anymore.
But
That's one thought. That's one thought out there.
But let me just counter that by saying, if 80 million people, that's an improvement from about 64 million,
Yes.
came to register to vote. I don't think the voter education is the problem. I think people
It's one of.
But interestingly, we now say this a lot, that politics is local. And so a lot of people who vote are actually in their states.
Yes.
As it is, the percentage of people who move from cities to their state to vote, it's not as high as we would like to posit. And so what happens to the people within their states, within places where they're registered, actually not coming to vote?
Those ones, like I said, people are complaining, oh, even if I come out to vote, my vote won't count. Votes are marred by violence. I don't want to go out. I mean, look at the number of this election for no reason. What will be the fate of their family members? What are they going to come out and say, oh, my husband died or my wife died because of this election? This is one of the reasons why people don't want to come out to vote. And like I said, for most people that traveled already to make their votes count, after the vote was cancelled, I'm sure most of them had to go back to work and then decided, you know what, I'm not going to make that trip again. After all, nobody's funding me. I'm doing this on my own as a patriotic citizen. But when you have people that are patriotic to their country and their country has refused to be patriotic to them, this is what you get. They refuse to come out to vote.
Okay, Douglas, so campaign season was interesting. We saw the numbers from two of the major parties, and realistically speaking, we had two major contenders, and amongst others. How do you think the campaigns affected the voting patterns of Nigeria? Did you had any influence? For instance, a good example is Kano State, where we saw huge numbers turn out for both parties, and then the results showed something different.
Yeah, well, when it comes to campaigns in Nigeria, there are different ways politicians do campaigns. Sometimes you just use funds to mobilize people to the stadium, use funds to mobilize people to open areas. The same set of people you see in the stadium for this candidate will be almost the same set. It will be the same set of people you see for the other candidate. So those the optics during the campaign seasons could be a little bit misleading. What really counts the most is the sentiment of the people on ground, their perception towards the candidate, and the voter behavior in those localities. We're analyzing prior to the elections. We're analyzing candidates and where they were likely going to get the chunk of their votes. And if you looked at it objectively, the incumbent always had massive voting turnout in the northeast and the northwest. He has always had a lot of followers who have always stood by him, irrespective of some of his inadequacies. Remember his first time of contesting in 2003. That's the incumbent president. He was able to churn out 12 million votes. He was contesting against Olusegun Obasanjo in 2003. A chunk of the vote, 80% of those votes came from the northwest and the northeast. In 2007, he got 6 million votes. In 2011, when he registered a political party, just like 8 months before the election, the CPC, he was able to get 12.1 million votes. He was in the opposition then, and 70% of those votes came from there. 2015, when he won, you know, he came in, he formed an alliance with political heavyweights in the southwest, and those who broke out from the PDP, and he was able to get 15 million votes in 2015. So
and in 2019 as well.
Sorry, in 2015
and
in 2019. So, and this election was about two candidates from the north, but one candidate who has always dominated in one section of the country, and he is the incumbent president. He has at least the party has become a national party, the APC, and so I felt the strategy of winning was what differentiated both
Well,
candidates.
interestingly, his major contender, Haji Atiku Abubakar, has been in politics, to the best of my knowledge, since the early 90s, since the time of MKO Abiola, where he wanted to run, and he's been the vice president of Nigeria. Yes, from the same of Nigeria. And so if it's based on popularity, I would say both of them had the
same level.
almost the same level of visibility.
I think it's not
with the
visibility.
people.
It's a matter of.
So it's not about the numbers, that's what I'm trying to say.
It is, and his point is quite very valid, because it's sort of a followership.
Yes.
The president has always had a consistent followership of people who have always been with him from 2003, 2007, and if you take a broader look and even look at some of his immediate staff, his personal domestic staff, from his personal cook to his personal assistants. These are people who have been with him since 2003.
Yeah.
2003, I mean. And they are still there, even up to this minute. So it flows down to his followership. You meet people in the grassroots who tell you that I have been voting for Buhari since 2003. I have been following Buhari since 1984. And there's been this consistency of people. So that pattern has been there. But on the flip side, Atiku Abubakar has been in politics.
Yeah.
And I think this is his one. I think probably his first or his second time.
The second.
He
He contested in 2007.
In 2007 with
AC,
Yaradua.
Yes.
Against Yaradua.
Yes.
And
on
then
that
He tried
action.
for the primaries of APC in 2015, didn't he?
Yes, no, I'm talking of
as
the
a-
general
as a
election.
contest-
This is his second time.
This is second time.
At
He
the general
contested
election.
first.
election
He
that
contested
he's
first in 2007.
And then I think in
actual
2011
Congress.
again.
No,
that
this
was
will
a
be his
primary.
second.
Okay,
That was
yes,
a primary.
sorry, in
This is the second time.
2019.
This
This
is
will be
the
his
second
second.
time in the ballot.
In the ballots distance. So Atiku may have been in the political system. He hasn't grown his followers at the ballot.
Yeah.
And that has differentiated his politics. Because you see, the general, or what we call the popular votes, is different from the primary system. And the primary system makes you a popular person within the party.
Within the party.
You're a force within the party. You can make sure that you get your tickets. That is a given for Atiku.
Okay, let's talk about the National Assembly, Marianne, and I'll come back to both of you for your opinions. We have 15 ex-governors returning to the Senate. The 8th Assembly, we had a lot of back and forth between the executive arm and the legislature. And of course, we talk about separation of powers and checks and balances. For some, it may be good for democracy, but for some, it's the fact that budgets were delayed. A lot of, till today, we've had back and forth with some appointments, and some people have been active for the last 4 years. Bringing in, and the Senate is now being called a retirement home. 15 former governors back in the Senate, 64 senators are not returning. So we pretty much have a rookie National Assembly per se. How does this affect the legislative process in the next 4 years?
That phrase that you said, they call the Senate now a retirement home, I think that's the way it's beginning to seem. You know, your governor for 8 years, you come back and this is where you fall back on. Saraki, and then this is where he falls back on. Roach has governor, and it's unbecoming of our it's not healthy for the country.
But they were voted for by their people.
Yes,
quote
it's
and
true
unquote.
that they were voted for, but I think we need to now have a law in place that says, look, this is not where you come to retire. We need to leave these things to the newer generation, to more people to come and with their fresh ideas and everything. You can't keep having the same people. And for most of them, I think they're just running away from whatever it is that the sins that they may have committed. So they're safe and stored away there for another 4 years. And then till they fight again to get into the office for the next 4 years.
So Douglas, do you think this affects the laws that would be passed, the bills that would be sponsored? Because people would try to protect their interests, as we've seen in the past. How do you think the new crop of National Assembly legislators who we have, how do you think that would affect the law-making process?
Well, I really don't think it will affect the legislature is completely different from the executive arm of government. And most times when these former governors come into the National Assembly, sometimes it takes some of them a little while to get used to the legislature, but the legislative process involves more like lobbying, more like making laws for the country. So it's a completely different ball game. But when you talk about the experience of old lawmakers in the legislature, I think they still have a lot of experienced lawmakers, and most times the experienced lawmakers are the ones that will guide the new ones in the parliament. You talk about some lawmakers that have been in parliament since 1999. Someone take for instance Ahmad Lawan. He has been in the National Assembly since 1999, 8 years in the House of Rep. He has been a senator since 2007. You talk about Ike Ekwemadu. He has been in Senate since 2003. James Manager has been in 3. Then some of the returning, some of the lawmakers that just won their elections. Some of the lawmakers that just won their elections, they've been in the Senate before. Okay. Talk about the governor of Ogun State, Ibikunle Amosun. He was a senator before he became a governor.
Okay, so they do have experience from different angles. But Toby, the last elections which we had last weekend, how do you think that would affect the gubernatorial and state House of Assembly elections, which we'll be having in the next weekend?
I think our democracy has grown, and it's not going to while the presidential election was a referendum on 2 candidates, largely, the gubernatorial elections will be totally different. It will be a referendum on the candidates that are on the ballots, and not just the parties. Bauchi State gave a very exciting results sheet in I think from one of its local governments. The president won. The House of Rep was PRP, and I think the Senate was PDP.
Yeah.
So the people are conscious. They know who they want to vote for.
Do you think turnout as well?
I think it's going to reflect in the states as well. We're going to have some states, PDP states, moving to APC, and APC states perhaps even moving to PDP, because people are going to come out and say, we don't want this candidate, we want this candidate. We want this candidate, we don't want this candidate.
Interesting. Marianne, final words, what would you advise the presidency and legislature to do about their relationship in the next 4 years?
For the presidency, I would say that since this is the last tenure that he has, and since he fought so hard to be here, he needs to maximize it to the best that he can. The infrastructures, the growth, the developments, the taxes, the tax issues, those areas he needs to really focus on them, focus on the growth of the nation. And then for the legislators, I hope that we can now have laws that would not just remain bills for as long as we actually have laws that are passed that would actually benefit the people. Okay, because that's the reason why they're there. They should pass laws that would really benefit.
Okay, Douglas, quickly. Yeah, quickly about INEC and their independence. What do you think INEC should do better in the next elections?
Well, I think it's about the government in power. The political will to amend the Electoral Act has to be paramount because issues regarding the elections must be better. In 2023, we shouldn't have most of the anomaly we had in this election. I believe digitalization of the electoral process, reducing the manual influences in the electoral process should be paramount. If you look at the Electoral Act that was not signed by the president, transmission of results from the polling unit to the collation center electronically would have reduced some of the problems we saw, especially transmission of ballot boxes from one location to the other. So I believe the Ninth National Assembly should prioritize the amendment of the Electoral Act. They should start it on time, and
but it's already been done. It's just waiting for assent. Do you think that should still be reviewed? Let me just hear from Toby.
The president sent some extra recommendations while adding the footnotes.
So do you think once that's done, it should be signed? Do you think that will ensure a free and fairer election?
See, one of the things that people need to be groomed on the whole transmission thing. We need to also get the cybersecurity rights.
Yeah.
The moment you digitize elections and you don't get cybersecurity rights,
as a professional, I'll tell you that's a major fear. It may even pose a bigger problem.
It's going to pose a bigger problem than even the ballot system.
Ballot papers.
You're going to have an election that can be won in Russia.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've run out of time, and I'm sure you've had an enlightening and interesting time on our political segment of the weekend show. I want to thank our guests for being with us. Hope to have you here some other time. Don't go away. We will be taking a break, and after that, more on sports and